Welcome to For Better or For Court, Family Law in New Jersey.
Hello and welcome back to For Better or For Court, Family Law in New Jersey with Ms. Alix Claps. Alix is a partner at Heymann and Fletcher and a certified matrimonial law attorney with years of experience guiding clients through divorce, custody, and complex family law matters across New Jersey. I'm Evan Mack, and today we're diving into how custody and parenting time are decided. This is How Custody and Parenting Time Are Decided in New Jersey. Welcome back, Ms. Alix.
Good morning. How are you, my friend?
Good morning. Good morning. I'm well. So let's talk to the people about this. What's the difference between legal custody and physical custody in New Jersey?
It's tough because we use the term custody in both ways. So legal custody is your ability to make decisions about your child. And usually when we're talking about legally custodial decisions, we're talking about the big ones. Where's your kid going to go to school? If your child, if there's a medical procedure, orthodonture, those are the kind of major decision-making things that we're talking about, not the day-to-day, what shoes are my kids wearing to school on a day. That's not what we consider a legal custodian decision. Physical custody, which I tend to avoid that term. I tend to use the term parenting time. But physical custody and residential custody and parenting time is all about where's the child when, who's the child staying with on what schedule. That can be a lot more flexible than legal custody.
So when a judge is deciding custody, what factors do they actually consider? What matters most to the court, in your opinion?
It varies, as with all legal things. I will say it is rare, not incredibly rare, but is much more rare for a judge to be weighing in on whether there is a sole or joint legal custody than what does the physical custody arrangement look like. Because in New Jersey, there is a presumption of joint legal custody. There's no presumption of what a physical custody schedule looks like. So you've got to look at or a judge has to look at an extremely fact-specific or take an extremely fact-specific approach to look at, how many kids are there? What are their ages? What do the parents do for a living? Where do the parents live? What are these kids' needs? What were these kids doing? What did the family dynamic look like before the parents stopped living together? There are a lot of different things. How do the parents communicate? Is there a restraining order? Is there an accusation of abuse against children about one of the other parents? Are there any addiction issues? Are there any legal difficulties? Is there an unemployment situation? Is one of the parents a shift worker? I mean, there's all kinds of things that can come up that's going to help the court determine what's in the best interest of the children. Because it's not about the parents, it's about the children.
Do parents always have to go to court to decide custody? Can they work out an agreement on their own, or does this have to be legal paperwork?
They can definitely work out an agreement on their own. It's generally wise to, at some point, whether it's along the way in your divorce, assuming the parents were even married, because custody issues exist for parents who were never married. But there's reasons to kind of document what your agreement is and file it with the court at some point for, to show that there's an agreement so that the court can enforce it, so the court can look at what was agreed upon if there's a need to change it down the line. But absolutely, parents can come up with a parenting schedule for their children or a custodial arrangement. In fact, the court rules specifically require a court to implement an agreed upon parenting plan unless there's a clear reason that it's not in the best interest of the children, that it would be detrimental to the children.
So how does Jersey typically handle parenting time? Is there a standard schedule? Does it vary? Do they just kind of make it up? Is it case by case?
It's case by case, and it varies wildly. A lot of people are going to try and tell you that there's a 50-50 presumption. There is no such presumption in New Jersey case law. You're not automatically going to get 50-50, but we're also not where in the past you might have assumed one parent's going to kind of be the default parent and the other parent's going to get every other weekend. There's a lot more variety. You can do a week on, week off. You can do a 2-2-3. So, a parent will have Monday and Tuesday. The other one will have Wednesday, Thursday. The first one will have Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And the next week it's a reverse. So the kids are kind of seeing the parents for the same amount of time, but not on consistent days. You could do a huge variety within there. And sometimes it's not equal. It's, one parent has every Tuesday and every other weekend because that's what works best for that family. Huge variety in what people come up with. And generally, I think that a lot of parents do come up with their own schedules. It is an unusual situation where a court has to, especially for the long term, impose a schedule on a family. It's usually a sign that there's some kind of underlying problem.
Alex, I see, maybe the status quo is that a female parent would always get more custody or potential custody over the male. That's kind of like what I've always been told or been taught, no matter what I've seen or heard. Like, do you feel that in your experience that's still the case? Do you feel that's a myth? What are you lying on that?
It's certainly a cliche. I'll say that when I see it, it's other factors other than the gender that's playing a role. But for example, a lot more women are school teachers than men. So when you're on a schedule that matches your children's schedule, it may make more sense for you to be the primary weekday parent.
Mhm.
Or, you end up with a father or a mother, who's in a higher power position, who may need, especially where I am, if they need to commute into the city, that means they're
Mhm.
leaving very early in the morning. They may be coming back very late at night. So you get the societal factors where at some point during the marriage, during the dynamic, these parents agreed that this was how we're going to organize our household. One of us is going to be the higher earner. One of us is going to prioritize our career. And societally, it still tends to be more men than women. Has nothing to do, mothers do not have magical powers. Trust me, I have two kids. I have no magical powers. I'm devoid of magical powers. I am not a better parent than my co-parent because I'm a mother.
Mhm.
But in our relationship, each of us have taken on certain roles, and you don't get to automatically redefine your roles, several years into having kids, because that's not fair to the kids. The kids have an expectation of a status quo and stability. So once you've established that, that is one of the factors that the court looks at.
What happened if one parent wants full custody? How does the court view that kind of request?
It takes a lot, especially again, we're talking about two different types of custody. So there's the sole legal custody, and there can be reasons for that, especially if co-parenting proves to be impossible. If we've got parents who, for one, if one says the sky is blue, the other will say the sky is yellow, and there is no middle ground. If they can't compromise, the court can't have them in there every other week to make tiny little parenting decisions for these parents. At some point, the court's going to have to give sole legal custody to one of the parents.
Mm.
But even if one parent has sole legal custody, the other parent's still entitled to parenting time and some residential custody. So then you have to look at what makes sense for these kids, what's going to minimize the conflict between the parents to make it healthy for these kids. The only cases where you end up with parents having either temporary or, in extreme cases, permanent suspension of their parenting time is where there's abuse, neglect, um, serious addiction issues that for the parent, a parent serves a jail term. They're not going to be parenting for however long that is. But those are sort of extreme circumstances. It's rare that in the absence of that, a court says, no, you're not entitled to any parenting time with your child.
Alex, you kind of touched on it earlier, but how do things like, school districts, extracurricular activities, parents' work schedule, how does that impact this parenting time arrangement?
As usual, it depends. Um, and it depends on the age of the children. It depends on, so for example, a kid in preschool is going to have a very different set of needs than a kid in middle school, but they've also been around for a lot less. So they've had a lot less time to become entrenched in their routines. So, a 3-year-old who's playing soccer on Saturday mornings is not going to have the same sort of extracurricular buy-in that someone who's playing for a competitive travel team is. Similarly, you have to really take a look when the kid is moving from preschool into elementary school. That's where a lot of these questions come up, is you have to kind of pick a school district and then have a good reason to change that. Or if a child is diagnosed with a learning disability or a developmental disability at some point in there, then you've got to look at what district available to these parents is going to offer the best opportunity for these kids. Up here, where I am, especially in northern New Jersey, housing is a huge problem for divorcing couples and parents who are splitting up. I don't want to presume marriage here. But to co-parent, you got parents who are living together, whether it's in a rental or they owned a home. somebody's got, maybe both parents have to move, but at least one of them, they're not going to continue to live together. It is hard to find an affordable rental or purchase in the same geographical area. It's a huge concern. So if you're thinking about moving 30 or 40 minutes away from where your kids have been for their entire life, you're asking the court to basically relocate your children at least part of the time.
How much does the court though take into account a child's wishes and a child's thoughts? Does it, like, age wise, does that matter, or is this kid can't make a decision about who they want to stay with?
The court can and should at varying points consider a child's wishes. I think the actual language in the court rules is when the child is of sufficient age and maturity to have input. In my experience, that can happen as young as 9 or 10. And it increases, the input that the child has increases with the child's age. So for example, if a 16-year-old says, look, I like my life, I like where I am, I don't want to go to my other parent's house during the week, it disrupts my routine, a court's going to respect that. And then even if the child's still in high school, once the child's 18, they're really not subject to the authority of the family court in the same way.
Are there any common myths about custody or parenting time that you wish people would understand more?
The first is there's no presumption of 50-50 parenting time. And I think with that, it's the idea that the amount of time that you spend with your children is as important as the quality of the time. I don't think that's true. I think an unequal parenting schedule in terms of actual hours or actual overnights, which is when we're talking about a parenting time schedule, we're often talking about where the child sleeps rather than how many hours a child is spending with the parent, waking hours. But I think that, weekend time generally is a lot more valuable than weekday time during the school year because you're doing homework. You're fighting about washing the hair. You're trying to get them to bed. You're trying to get them to eat something other than goldfish for dinner. You're trying to find the sports equipment for the next day. Or you're chauffeuring them around town because they've got activities after school. That's not the same kind of quality time that a weekend can be with the child. And so I think when I'm talking to a parent and we're looking at the various parenting time schedules, we want to make it a minimum burden on the kids, but maximize the quality time.
So for parents starting at this process, what's one piece of advice that you would give them about keeping their children's best interest front and center?
I usually start by asking them to describe their children's week. I don't care about the parents' week. I care about what does your child's week look like? Like what time do they get up? Who feeds them breakfast? Who gets them dressed for school? How do they get to school? Do they like what they're doing at school? Are they staying after school for activities? Are they in before or after care? What's going on with them? And then we figure out sort of how do the parents fit into the child's needs, because giving the kids stability is going to help with the transition, because what you don't want to do is harm your child.
Miss Alix, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Awesome. And thank you all for listening to today's episode For Better or For Court, Family Law in New Jersey. If you're facing custody questions or want help understanding your options, visit HeymanFletcherLaw.com to connect with Miss Alix. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review if you found this information helpful. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.